My husband Darren and I dated for 5 years before he finally introduced me to his parents. We'd kept our relationship a secret from them, even though we were both adults, because his parents were highly religious people. Well, the word, and I quote, highly religious is an understatement of what they really were. Darren knew his parents would not approve of somebody who did not share the exact same ideology with them, and that's why I spent time trying to feign something I was not. I'm from a far less religious background, and I believe one should not be criticized or berated for that. This was something Darren's parents did. Darren and I got married, and though congratulations were in order, I did not feel as elated as I ought to. The wedding day is the bride's day, one of the most important days of her life, and she should be left to decide how she wanted things to go. But the whole thing was the direct opposite. You could call it a wedding setup to not please the bride, but to please her in-laws. The fact that I let them box me into a corner without speaking up about what I wanted left me traumatized for some time, and I began resenting my in-laws' view on life. Darren had pleaded with me to just play the part so we could get married without any form of opposition from his family. He promised that we were going to live in a different city, and this meant that we would be out of the reach of the influence. Did I mention that Darren's parents, besides being highly religious, were equally rich and influential? Well, yeah, they are. If the reverse was the case, then I would not have wasted time going through all I did just to get married to their son. Don't get my statement twisted, though. I am no gold digger. I'm just saying that there are different limits to what one would naturally tolerate from a highly rich and powerful family, and a family that is poor or average. It took about 2 years before my husband and I welcomed our first son and only child, Pete. My in-laws were glad to have an addition to their family, and we won the favor of Darren's parents. We rarely spent time together except for the one time a year when everyone in my husband's family would gather at a family house for a reunion. Darren's parents were not happy with that. They wanted us closer than we were, and it's not because they loved us to the point that they could not live without seeing us. Oh no! It's because they just wanted to have us around so their influence in our lives would never diminish. Darren and I knew this, and that was why, we purposely stayed away. Our son Matt was in his teenage years in high school when we made a discovery that changed the course of events for us. Matt, like his mates, was prepared for prom, and while every other person sought for a date to the party, my son was reluctant about it. Darren had gotten him a very nice tuxedo, which was going to look good on him as the day of the prom drew closer. The reluctance of our son also grew stronger. My husband and I had to talk to him about, we had to find out why he was having cold feet about something which his peers were eager about. And he told us that he could not bring himself to attend prom as he needed a date. Darren and I felt he was finding it difficult getting a date for prom, so Darren attempted giving him tips and tricks to ask a girl out, but Matt was not interested. We knew then that whatever it was that was troubling him was super serious. We pressed further, and Matt reluctantly told us that he was not interested in girls. He never was. Darren and I were both shocked. You could see the look of shame on the face of our son as he told us about himself. He was not sure how he would react as he knew about the religious background of his father. Darren and I were startled, but we just wanted to properly understand the situation at hand. We asked Matt if he was attracted to guys, and he bowed his head while saying yes. He said that he never really felt like a man. I was shocked at what I was hearing, but it started to make more sense to me. Our son had never really had the masculine aura about him. I'd caught him countless times putting on my makeup or wearing one of my wigs, and I just laughed it off, and then with the excuse that it was child's play. I never knew what I called child play was an indicator that my son was exhibiting his feminine side. This was a lot to take in. Darren stood up and walked into our room while I hugged my son. I knew it was difficult for Darren to accept our son's sexuality for obvious reasons, and though it was not easy for me too, I just had to be there for our son. I assured Matt that he was not a monster for feeling the way he did. Neither was he a low-class human being because of his sexuality. I stayed with him till he slept off before going to talk to Darren about it. My husband and I had a lengthy discussion, and though Darren loved his son, he did not know how to react to the whole thing. He was scared of what his parents' reactions would be when they found out the truth about our son's personality. His parents, on the other hand, well, they were the least of my worries. I cared less about whatever their thoughts, words, actions could be when they knew the truth about my son. My focus was on Matt, and this was what I made Darren understand. We had to be there for him during this period in his life. I even suggested to Darren that we go to a counselor just to help us deal with the situation properly. Darren did not object to my suggestion, and we both saw one as a family. He made us understand it was perfectly normal. He said that was a way in which Matt would boldly stand up to the world, without being ashamed of himself, as if he was certain he had the support of his family. Well, I and Darren began working to make sure our son was not alone. We had him sit his prom out, though. We were still getting him prepped up to face the world, and we did not want to rush any step. Time quickly passed, and it was time for, well, our annual family reunion. My husband's family. This was something we usually attended, and it would be absurd if we did not attend the reunion for the year. After a little deliberation, Darren and I decided that we would attend the reunion with our son. I reassured Matt that it was going to be fine, and I would stand up to anyone who would want to talk him down. I was not going to let my in-laws put him in a box like they had done to me on my wedding day. So, we arrived at the family house, but Matt dressed like a boy. Darren suggested that he did not just appear as a trans till we had to announce it to the family. I knew Darren was still shaky about what his parents' reactions would be, but there was a little wisdom in what he had said, so I did not object. Besides, Matt was okay with it. Everyone was happy to see everyone, and, well, everyone looked forward to the activities that always featured in our reunions. Me and my husband and our son were happy, but we were not at peace on the inside, as we knew we were about to make an announcement that could bring the family reunion to a close even before it began. The reunion always featured a party the next day. The whole family gathered together, but Matt was not present. Yet, Darren and I looked for the perfect opportunity to break the news to the family, and it came when Darren's father noticed our son was not here. The moment he asked us about Matt's whereabouts, Darren called the attention of everybody present into the room. There was silence in the air all around as they wondered what Darren was up to. You see, Darren began telling them how we had gone through a lot as a family in recent times and how it had brought us closer. Everyone eagerly anticipated the important news for which Darren had breached their celebrations. Darren finally put an end to their wait when he told them that our son had recently discovered his true sexuality, and he came out as trans. The moment Darren said so, he signaled for Matt to come out. Well, Matt came out dressed as a lady, and everyone initially thought it was just a joke. Darren's parents were looking at us to find out if the whole thing was some sort of form of reunion prank. Everyone present suddenly realized it was no joke, as Darren put his hand on Matt's shoulders and asked that they all respected his decision. The whole place went ice cold as you could feel the, quote, spirit of celebration lift from the atmosphere. My in-laws stood transfixed while looking at us in shock and disbelief for 5 minutes. Darren's parents did not say a word. They left the place and went into their room. Darren wanted to go, talk to him, but I advised him against it because I knew the whole "you have failed us" look at his parents gave to him was getting to him. We did not wait around to hear what others thought, we just retired to our bedroom. It took forever for the day to break, but when it finally did, my family and I did not want to join the house for breakfast, as we knew they did not want us there. But we went all the same. After all, we had to eat. We got to the large dining table, and everyone was having their breakfast in silence, and there was enough space between where we usually sat down and the rest of the family. It was intentional, and I knew that was the beginning of, well, our segregation. We were about to sit down when my father-in-law barked at us in anger, claiming that light and darkness cannot mix. Everyone stopped eating and began watching for the drama that was to unfold. Darren did not ask for challenging of his father for the outburst because his father began spitting fire about how Darren's unlike his siblings and deviated from the, quote, path of light, join breed and bring to a devil into the house. Up until then, I had been understanding. I mean, it's normal to have people react negatively to this kind of news, but I was not happy hearing my father-in-law refer to my son as a devil. He was a human being whom I carried in my womb for 9 months, not a devil. I said or did nothing, though, as it would make my religious in-laws think their son had further deviated from their, path of truth by abdicating his position of leadership to the wife. According to them, the wife did not have much say in the matter, as though he had heard my mind. Darren tried making his father see that our son Matt was a human like him, not a devil, just for changing his sexuality, but his father was not having any of it. He ridiculed my son by saying that, well, we had enough unmarried ladies in the family who were still finding it difficult to get a spouse and they did not need an additional one to the queue. At that moment, my son broke down crying. It was insensitive of my father-in-law. Among everyone present, not one person even said a word. No one person came to our defense, and that was because they feared my father-in-law so much as to go against his precepts. I ran after my son, who had run into our room crying while Darren spoke with his father. Darren later came to meet us in the room while I had just comforted my son to sleep. He said the whole thing with his father had ended with him asking him to take the, quote, devil out of the house. We were still talking when we got interrupted by his mother's knock. From the look on her face, you could tell that this was the woman who still loved her grandson even though he was, well, been seen as the devil because of his sexuality. It's a pity her religion had boxed her into a corner of stupidity and the guise of submission, and so she just could not stand up to her husband. I can't imagine getting married to a man whom I can't call out when he messes up, or when he's headed for the rocks. Thankfully, Darren is nothing like his dad. His mother started by apologizing to us about the whole thing, and she claimed that my father-in-law was only trying to save the family, and that having our son come out as a trans was not helping the issue in any way. That was the indirect way of saying my son was smearing the face of the family with shame. Darren told her that we had decided to support our son all the way and our decision was not going to change anytime soon. My mother-in-law said that we were leading him down the wrong path. She claimed as Matt's parents, it was our duty to strengthen him out as a child can sometimes be very unsure of what they truly wanted. After telling us how displeased everyone, especially my father-in-law, was, she gave what she claimed was the solution. Purification. Yeah, that's right. The whole thing was getting me irritated on a whole new level. As I listened to my mother-in-law tell us that her husband was demanding, well, we subject my son to some form of purification to cleanse the devil from him. It's just not going to stop there. She equally noted that we would have to stop our son from parading himself as a trans, and make sure he began taking religious activities oh so seriously. According to their theory, if we would have made sure he spent lots of time in the church, then, well, his mentality would not be as twisted as it was. Hell would have broken loose if it were someone else who had called my son mentally twisted. Not even my parents would talk to me or treat my son the way my in-laws were doing and get away with it. I did not say a word till my mother-in-law left the room. I made it clear to my husband that I was leaving with our son the very next day, and if he came along, well, or not, that's his business. Darren didn't even oppose. He knew I could be a troublemaker when I get mad. We left the next morning without as much as a goodbye from my in-laws, and the only one who spoke to us was my father-in-law. Well, what he had to say was this: we should never bring that devil into his home unless he goes through the cleansing ritual. Cleansing ritual, my foot. I would not have wanted to step foot in their home anymore, even if I was offered $1 million. The cleansing ritual which my mother-in-law spoke about involved them calling the elders of the church, who would then surround my son while reading certain portions of the Bible out loud to him, and commanding him to reject the devil and all of his works. It was not a purification or cleansing ritual as they claim. It was a torture session, when they would demoralize and just kill your self-esteem. I know this because my husband Darren had witnessed some of these sessions while growing up with his dad. My family and I returned home, and though we tried putting the whole issue behind us, I could tell it was a difficult thing for Darren to do. I understand. It's not easy to be torn apart by the decision to stand by your family to the detriment of straining your relationship with your siblings. Well, 2 weeks after we returned, Darren's older sister came to see us. She'd been present at the reunion, and just like everyone else, she kept quiet and distanced herself because she did not want to fall out with her father. We welcomed and treated her warmly. Matt was at a friend's place. Darren and I were trying to ensure that he stayed around supportive people who accepted him for who he was. His absence, I think, was a good thing, because it would have affected him badly if he heard my sister-in-law trying to talk us into undergoing, the ritual, so we would not have to be cut off from the family. What irony. Our son and friends who accepted him, just as he was, but his grandfather. Wow, and the entire family is the ones that rejected him. From what I deduced, my sister-in-law was acting on behalf of her other siblings who were inspired by their parents to try to make us see the, quote, light, and steer our son back into the right path. As you can tell, the first step is subjecting him to their cleansing. We thanked her for coming, but reiterated our stand on the matter. Before leaving, we asked her to never come back to our house if all she wanted to do was try to make us see the light. It's been 3 months now, and we've not heard from our in-laws, and I don't care though, because we don't need the hate energy which they spread. What's up everybody, Mr. Reddito here. Today's story is definitely a wild ride. The family's turning against OP and their own son, and claiming their grandson is now the devil. Guys, there is multiple updates to hop into this story. I hope you're having a fantastic day. If you're new to the channel and you like these sort of videos, go ahead and click that subscribe button for daily videos. And let's just jump into the update. The peace which my family enjoyed has been interrupted once again by my in-laws. Why would they not just let the devil live in peace since they were saints, right? We recently began receiving hate messages directed toward our son. We would sometimes have a parcel delivered to us and it would be a Barbie doll dressed as a man or something of that sort. We initially suspected it came from Darren's siblings, but there's no concrete evidence. Our suspicions, though, were soon confirmed when we got a package with nothing but the drawing of our son who had a demon behind him. The drawing had an inscription that said, "Embrace the light." No other person than my in-laws could have sent that, so I pushed Darren into obtaining a restraining order against them. Darren was reluctant about it, but that was the only way we could protect our son from their religious wickedness. Our move to shut them down, it failed. Darren's parents unexpectedly showed up, or rather still, barged into our home today while he was at work and verbally attacked my son. They claimed he was responsible for the strained relationship which now existed between them and Darren. I think one could write a story titled, "Grandpa Accuses Grandson of Stealing the Love of His Son." How pathetic. Darren was not around, so I had to stand up for our son. My in-laws were taken aback by it. What did they expect? Did they expect me to just sit down like a zombie and watch them tear my kid apart? My father-in-law tried rebuking me by telling me to keep quiet, as it's not my place to speak up since he's a man. And, well, a man speaking, and had not been demanded my input. I know you're probably mad, just as mad as I was hearing what my father-in-law told me, and I had no say in the issue that concerned my own son. Yeah, right. To make matters worse, this is my house. I left them with my son and walked into the room. Why did I do that? Oh, because I immediately reached out to the cops and went back to start exchanging words again with my in-laws. I threw caution to the wind and said the things that have been locked up in my chest for a while. I told them they would not run the life of my child, and the way they were doing it, we were still heated when the cops came around though. They were surprised at the sound of the siren blaring in the house, and they did not think I would have done something like this, calling the cops on them. So I ran out the door and greeted the cops and told them that the lives of my son and I were in deep danger by the very person we had obtained a restraining order against. Well, the cops swooped into action and arrested my in-laws very swiftly. I watched as they drove them out of the house, and then it dawned on me that I had just gotten my in-laws arrested. I don't want to tell Darren over the phone. I'm waiting for him to come back home. Update number 2. Well, I'm making this update from a place of panic. My life has not been the same ever since the drama with my in-laws that day. My husband Darren came home and I informed him that his parents had forced themselves into our home earlier and were assaulting our son and me. I told him I had no other option to get the cops involved. Well, Darren was not happy that his parents had barged into our home and were verbally assaulting me and our son, but his countenance changed the moment I mentioned calling the cops. He did not find it funny that I called the cops on his parents, and he admitted that his parents had gone overboard and barging into our home and assaulting us. But he said it's not right to get the cops involved. Well, to be honest with you guys, I was angry, I was sad, I was feeling it all. How could the question of the actions I took to protect our son and me? Yeah, I get it. They're his parents, but they were behaving irrationally. Was I to sit there with my hands on my butt and watch his parents prey on our kid? Our voices were going over the roof, and we failed to notice our son was watching the whole thing. He was in tears. Darren made me to leave the house, and I asked where he was going, and he said he's going to fix my mess. Fix my mess. He called my act of protection a mess. He was still hooked on things, his family said. I went straight to my room to cool off, and I think I stayed there for about 15 minutes before remembering that the victim in all this was our son. So, I went into his room to play down the whole thing, but he wasn't there. I checked the whole house, but our son was nowhere to be found. I even tried reaching my husband on his phone, but of course, he's not answering. Darren got home and was visibly upset. I knew it was not just because of the argument we had earlier on, as it was not the first time we would be arguing. He began blaming others for what happened at the police station. His parents. Well, you're not going to believe this. His parents had used their influence to get out of the detention before he got there, and though he tried apologizing to them, they just ignored him. What a fool. He was busy feeling sorry for his parents, and they were angry that they had gotten locked up for violating the restraining order while our son was missing. I did not have time to play the blame game with him, pointing fingers, so I immediately told him that our son was nowhere to be found. The news knocked a little bit of sense into him, and we immediately drove to the police station to file missing persons report, though they promised to use the resources at their disposal to locate our son. We could not sit down and wait for them to do the job alone. It's been a day since our son Matt disappeared, and there's been no favorable news. We have called a few friends who were supportive of him, but they all claim to not know about his whereabouts. Update number 3. Well, our son Matt's been returned to us even though the dust was raised. Darren had put a call across to his siblings to inform them that our son had been missing for days. I don't know if his son's reasoning for doing this was to garner their sympathy or to make them overlook the fact that I had locked his parents up. Whatever the case was, though, it didn't work. Though his brothers and sisters did rejoice at our misfortune, they did not sympathize with us either. They took the news to Darren's father, who said he had lost his son to the devil months ago. How cold. Darren and I received a call from one of the parents of Matt's friends. They claimed that they'd been staying at their house for some days, and Darren and I immediately rushed down there. But the cops arrived before us. These same parents who called us to inform us that our son was at their place called the cops to inform them of the situation just in case our son Matt was being ill-treated by us. Well, to be honest with you guys, I don't blame them though. They were only acting in his best interest. Matt had lied to them that they were aware he was staying at their place, till they saw the missing persons report and just knew it was a lie. The cops who were aware we had filed a missing persons report at their situation refused to release our son to us till we answered some questions. They questioned us to know what the situation at home was like. Matt was equally interrogated, and though his response corroborated with ours, he said something that shattered my heart. He told the cops that he had decided to leave the house because he could not help being the problem of the family. I just did not know what to do at this point in time. You see, Darren's actions sent the message that he had picked the side of his family over me and our son. From how Matt spoke about being the problem of the family, you could tell his self-esteem and worth had been bruised. I could not help tears that rolled down my face as I told my son we would never pick anyone else over him. Darren was trying to reassure the rubbish too, and though I kept quiet, I knew I would not let the whole issue slide. He cleared up with the police and we were free to go with our son. There was silence in the car as Darren drove us home. I planned on waiting till our son had gone to bed before confronting Darren. He got the memo from my attitude and was the one who approached me to talk about it. He apologized for the way his actions were perceived by our son. He said that though he was against his parents' behavior toward us, he was trying to see how he could not make their different opinions about their son gravitate towards hatred. I understand that detaching from one's family is not so easy, but I could no longer bear his attachment to them. I demanded that he cut off his family, otherwise I would divorce him, and he has to seek custody of our son while making sure he paid alimony. Darren was surprised at my demand. I didn't care. I really didn't. I simply laid down and went to sleep while he processed what I just told him. So, my question to you guys is this. Am I the a-hole for demanding my husband cut off from his family who was treating us badly because of our son and the sexuality he chose? Update number 4. This is the final update. Guys, there is a closure to this. A satisfactory one at that, and so this would be my last update. My husband was battling with my demands about, totally and officially cutting off from his family when his father helped him out. My father-in-law gathered his family and publicly declared that he had disowned his son Darren, after his son teamed up with him to get him and his wife arrested. He left out the part where they were trying to run the home of their, mature son for him. He didn't stop there. Darren's father gathered the family together, called the lawyer, and struck off Darren's name from the will. The denial of inheritance did not hurt Darren as much as smearing of his public image, though. His dad knew that if he told the complete truth to the public about his arrest, my family and I would have more people in our favor as society is now accommodating special folks like my son. Darren's father's actions was the catalyst that pushed Darren right into deciding to cut off them from their life. Darren even decided to get back at them while at it. Darren went public with the whole thing, and he spoke about how his religious father had controlled the lives of him and his siblings even as mature folks. I believe Darren would make for a good storyteller. He exposed his father's controlling attitude before going on to talk about their religious wickedness. His father had exhibited towards him, me, and our son simply because our son was trans. Darren had the restraining order and the police on his side to validate his claims. His explanation cleared my name and made the public no longer see me as the manipulative daughter-in-law nightmare who locked her in-laws up. They rather saw me as the mother who would do anything to protect her kid. Well, the whole thing trended for a while in our town, with people backlashing my in-laws for their negative and backward mentality in this modern age. Even their clients weren't very happy with them, and their business had been dropping ever since, and I just can't help but wonder if they would be anything for Darren's siblings to inherit at the end of the day. Wow, that's their business though. Darren, Matt, and I are currently living in our lives in peace. Various LGBTQ support groups have been reaching out to us. They want to help rebuild our son's self-worth, which my in-laws had crumbled. I'm happy with the way things are right now.